First off, I'd like to thank Ms. Crump for taking her time and sitting down with us to talk on some issues in regards to school systems and the community in general. She is running for School Board District 3, isn't that correct?
Yes.
That is correct, and I really appreciate her time and her concern and her stance that she's taken. I'm supporting her during this journey, and I think times are changing, and I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. First off, I think it's only right to give her condolence for the family that just lost their small child at a young age in a tragic accident. I know it's tough on the community. I remember when it happened to us in our school, in our grade, in our time when we were here, and we just want to lift our prayers up for that family and the Buford community in the whole.
Absolutely.
But first, I'd like to just ask you, why now? Like, why did you decide to run now, and what's your stance and what's your values of why you're running?
Well, Garrett, I think there's 4 people in this race, and so why now is because it's time, and I think that this whole district realizes that it's time. But for me personally, the reason why now is, I gained custody of my 2 boys in 2019, and I wasn't able to work anymore after that because I had 3 kids at home.
Right.
And so being a parent, a former employee, a former student, I saw a lot of things. And then when COVID hit, it put a microscope on the district with a lot of issues that were going on. And for me, it was enough is enough.
Right.
It was not enough transparency, not enough accountability, and not just Buford, but District 3 and the entire district. They need a voice. Everybody needs a voice, and I felt like ours was a little too silent.
I would have to agree with you. I think sometimes I think equity in the schools has been a big stance, I think, for everybody that's running, and I think there's a lot of understanding, as the county's growing. I think there's just, like you said, needs to be a little bit more transparency. Another thing, in talking with your constituents and the people that you're representing, I know you have your own stances, but what's some of their biggest issues that have been, that they have communicated to you?
Well, yeah, Garrett, I have been out, in Buford being so rural, it's not like I can go door to door a lot, but in the communities that I can go door to door, I do, and I talk to people, and I make phone calls every night, every Saturday, just getting to know people and letting them get to know me. Right. And so some of the biggest things that I've heard about is the fiscal watch. People are concerned about their taxes and where they're going. If you look at your tax bill, about 70% of it goes to the school district.
I think I think a lot of people don't realize that, and that's I was going to touch on that, but go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Well, we can definitely hit on that again later. I actually brought a copy that we could go over.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of people are wondering what's going on with their money. Why are some schools suffering and they need things, and other schools are getting everything? And I know when everybody hears that, they know what we're talking about. They know the schools we're talking about, and I understand that there's a lot of growth in the Panhandle, and they may need schools. But what they don't need is for projects to be grossly mismanaged and cost even more money that should be going to the other schools in the district.
Right.
And so that's a big thing I'm hearing from people is equity through money and budget and things like that. But also they're worried about security. That has come up a lot, especially with a lot of the national news and things like that. And
Right.
so security is a big deal and something that is very near and dear to me as the child of a former law enforcement officer too. When he was employed with the sheriff's office, he would do trainings for school shootings.
Right.
And he was trained, if you get called to a school that your daughter is at, you have to go in like she's not there. And that's the best way to defend her, is to defend everybody.
Right.
And to neutralize the threat. And so that's very near and dear to me, and I think that our district is doing better than a lot of districts around us when it comes to security, but there are other things that we can do, and I've heard that from the constituents as well.
Well, it's like anything, is you hate to have to prepare for something like that, but you have to prepare in anything in life, and I think that should be a very top priority list. Just the day and age we live in right now, is we have to be prepared at the highest cost, because that could happen to this school, that can happen to any school in the district or any school in the state, and luckily it hasn't happened, but it's just a tough situation.
That is one of those that you absolutely would rather be safe than sorry about.
That's
I mean, that is
exactly
the
right.
prime example of that.
So this is just tangent thought. Like, do you think that there should be more resource officers, or how is you think it should be a state level thing, or a
Actually,
federal level thing, or how to raise money to? Because this one thing that I thought about is as far as federal level and things. I know that we're just on a small level school board is we're sending a lot of money to other other countries, and that we could possibly be help it somehow fund at a way lower cost to protect our kids. And I think they scream, why does this keep happening? But there's could be possibly ways that we could prevent it and fund the school in a sense of and protection. And we're sending billions and billions and billions of dollars elsewhere that's not even in our own country, our own states, our own local.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one thing that all this is going on with the Ukraine stuff and the school shootings. Like, there's got to be a way from top down and to help support localized safety.
I think so, and actually at the state level, they actually do have funding for an SRO for every single school.
Okay.
The problem is finding the SROs, and I think one of the things that's very important is that there has to be a lot of intergovernmental connections. So that's one reason why when I first started this, before I ever thought about running, I started reaching out to state representatives and federal representatives, and since then have actually been endorsed by state representatives and even by U.S. Congressman Ralph Norman, because he feels that those things are important as well.
Right.
And so we do have the funding for the SROs. One of the things that we have to work on the state level.
For people that don't know what SRO is, what does that stand for?
So that is a school resource officer.
Okay.
And so the majority of our schools in Lancaster do have them, but there are a lot that still need them. And so we want to make sure that they're in every school. Just speaking with a teacher on the phone, a former teacher on the phone this week, she was talking about how they didn't have an SRO, and if they had an upset parent or something, by the time that they got the police there, it was too late.
Yeah, that can't
and so
happen.
exactly, and that's why it's important to get these school resource officers in every building. And like I was saying about the state, they have put the funding there for them, but the problem is that there are state laws that prevent these. You can retire at a pretty young age with police benefits or even with state retirement. And so a lot of these SROs actually retired and then came back. And so one of the issues that we have is at the state level, you have to wait a year before you can come back. And so it's hard to get them to come back after a year. If we can work with our state legislators to eliminate that year so that they can start right then I mean, that would be a great process. And I will say this about the SROs that I know in this district, we could not get any better, and we just need more of them.
Right. Well, I think that's, for me, I don't have a kid, but if I was a constituent, I would definitely be pushing that right now. And like you said, you have kids that are growing up. I got nieces and nephews, and they're like my kids. I mean, they're old, what I mean. They are like my kids. So I think that should be at least on the top of the list. But we're talking about monetary concerns, and we talked about the property tax. The latest thing that I think that a lot of people have talked about that's maybe been lost, but it's kind of coming back up, is the bond referendum that was, I think, was it 2010 or 12 that was passed. And there's a lot of mixed emotions, and they passed a lot of these bond referendums on special elections, and people don't have, there's no plans. And it's honestly, I hate to use this word, but a disgrace of how our tax dollars are being represented, and something being passed through so quick. To me, I just think that is a wrong way to go about it. You don't build a house without plans.
Absolutely.
You don't do anything without plans. And I guess for me to keep, I'm not, I can ramble on about that. But what, as far as the bond referendum, and if there's future ones with the growth of this county that is coming in, I guess your stance on what happened and what you dug into it, and the future of what is to hold on that.
Well, I will tell you that I did not vote for the last referendum. The reason why I did not vote for the last referendum is because even then, before getting as involved as I am now, I did not trust the district, and I did not trust the board to spend the money the way they said they were going to spend it. And I will say I've been proven right on that. And so we have a brand new multi-purpose building. Well, that's great. But it's so expensive to use. It was marketed to the community. The community was supposed to be able to use it. They can't afford to use it. We've got this
So
really.
is it cost to use?
Yes, you have to rent it.
Okay.
So you have to rent to use the facility. You have to pay for custodians. You have to pay for a school worker to be there to open and close. Depending on if you use audio, visual, and things like that, it can get very, very expensive. And we're sitting here on an amazing field. It looks awesome, but my question is, should we be spending money on things like that if our district is not top in education in the state? We need to make sure our students can read and write before we start doing turf fields and multi-purpose buildings.
Yeah.
And when we do find a real need that comes up, like schools, we're sitting here right near Buford Middle. How old is Buford Middle?
Yeah. My parents went to high school.
My grandmother went there.
Right.
Yeah. So, there are times when we're going to need new schools. Buford Middle, Heath Springs Elementary, several. Indian Land is included. They have needed new schools. But let's plan for that, and let's use the people's money in the right way, and let's be good stewards of their money. A lot of us, especially in the current economy, are having to cut back on things, and every little thing adds up. And I've made a joke before about the fact that I had to cut back on my iced coffees because my family was feeling it because of inflation, so
Right.
I don't get 5 or 6 iced coffees a week now.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing the district has to do. For them, an iced coffee might be a $20,000 program here, or a position here, or something like that. And we've got to look at that and see how we can cut things so that we're not being frivolous with other people's money.
And more or less that, coming from a businessman, I think that the school system is a business. It's education is first, but you have to run it as a business and lean in on that because it is a business. It's, at the end of the day, you don't want to pay for something more than you're supposed to.
Exactly.
And I guess speaking on that, the equity of the schools and how that, that hones in on that question of the referendum, because the distribution of where it goes. Understood the Panhandle growth, which pays a lot of property tax and retail tax and everything to that nature.
They do also cost a lot too.
Yeah, that is true. And I guess what I'm asking is how do we, like we said, the underlying theme on some of the, the people that are running is the equity in schools, and which is great. That seems great on surface. But how do we create equity throughout the school system?
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm running on is accountability too, and so equity comes with accountability. If we are holding the people accountable that are spending our money, then that means that it is equitable. And it's just very important that we know what's needed in all the areas of our district, and that means having a voice too. And so when it comes to spending a lot of money in one area, we've got to work together as a board to say, yeah, that probably is necessary, but there's a building over there with boards for windows. That's necessary too.
Correct. I think that's a great stance. I know you mentioned before about the fiscal watch, and I think you really have honed in on that. I think on your platform. I guess how's that affected your confidence in the district, and what has drawn the most concerns? Because I think this is the overlying theme of what we're talking about here. How is the fiscal watch in your eyes affected your confidence or people that you've talked to?
Well, yeah, just to walk it back a little bit about how the fiscal watch came about and how people in this county learned about it, was actually the board didn't know about it. At least the majority of the board didn't know about it.
Which is very shocking to me. How do you not know that?
Well, it's because for so long, I think a lot of the board has just said yes, yes, yes to anything the district said, when their job is to step back and question it. Not necessarily to say that they're not doing their job, but to question it so that we know they are doing their job. And so the way that most of the county found out was through our legislators finding out, because they were copied on a letter from the State Department that said that we were under fiscal watch. At that point, the district had already been warned that they were going to be placed on fiscal watch, and nobody was told, including the board. So that was the first strike of confidence that we lost. Why are you hiding it? Yeah. And I'm not saying they were hiding it, but that's what people feel like.
Or lack of knowledge, even knowing.
Yeah, exactly. And then the further you start digging into it, the more you learn that, okay, they already knew about this. Not only that, but they actually appealed it at the state level, went to a meeting at the State Department of Education in Columbia, and I traveled down there for that meeting. And the reason why I did is because I didn't trust them to come back and tell me what really happened. And so
doing your due diligence.
Exactly. And there were some other board members there, so and there was some people from Lancaster News and some people from the district, and I guess I could say I was the only parent there and the only candidate there. But at that meeting, it was revealed that the reason we were under fiscal watch was because this had happened 3 years in a row on our audit. So this was not a one-time thing. This was 3 years that the district had sent in the exact same corrective action plan to the state and did nothing to correct it. And so,
do you know what that plan consists, or what was the corrective? What was
so the whole thing revolved around the food services account and the way that it was listed, whether it was a special revenue or just and it was a lot of, according to the district, it was a lot of wording. And logistic things. But if it was that simple to fix, why wasn't it fixed in 2019? And that's what brings about more questions and more doubt about not just a special revenue fund for food services, but about a lot of other funds. And Promise Neighborhood is being questioned now, and they actually had a special meeting about that this morning. And the reason why people are questioning it is it all started with the fiscal watch. I don't think anything illegal or even immoral happened. But when you seemingly hide things or keep it from people, you make them think that there is. And that's why I think, it's very important that we're being transparent. I've done a lot of FOIA requests. I asked for an itemized capital budget for the Beaufort area and was told it didn't exist. And I just don't see how that's plausible in a district to not have an itemized capital budget list. So there's just a lot of things that, if that doesn't exist, why? Because it should. And at one time it did.
Yep.
So those are the things that stemmed from the fiscal watch that just further cast doubt on the district's ability to handle our taxpayer money.
And that also shows you that what you just stated also shows the attention that is being placed on speaking on equity in the schools. If there's no attention being placed on even as small as a budget, then how are you supposed to have growth? How are you supposed to manage your revenues, minus your expenses? If there's no budget or no even attention if I don't put attention to my business, then eventually
it fails.
So that is a cause of concern. The attention that is being placed, and not in just prime, or the Panhandle. We love what's going on because it is going to affect us eventually. It's going to affect
exactly, and we've got to be prepared for that.
And you got to be prepared, because it goes back to being prepared. Proper preparation prevents.
And that's why I think
performance.
it's so important that we have relationships between our school board, our council, and our state legislator, because we've got to make sure that that there are the proper impact fees, and that the school board, or I say the school district is not going to be stuck funding schools for all this growth, because like you said, it's not going to stop in Indian Land. Just a few weeks ago at the county council meeting, they voted for a new development that is past number 5 right there at the racetrack. So it's coming, and it's going to come to Beaufort. It's going to come from Charlotte, Indian Land, Monroe, and so we've got to be ready for it instead of being behind the buck like we have been in the Panhandle.
We've growing up, always heard, I've been out of school 7-8 years now, but even before that, growing up, you always heard like it's coming. But I think, like I was telling one of my coworkers that was with me, I said I think it's now officially is here. So it's the time to act is now, and to be prepared. In just the small senses of like what you're talking about, just having a budget. I mean, you have a budget in your household.
Exactly.
It's simple. It's not unlimited funds. And I wanted to talk about we're talking about transparency, which I think is great, because I try to lean in on that with my business and everything. I think transparency with any relationships or anybody is great. How do we create? It might be a simple answer, but I'm gonna ask it. How do we create transparency from from the school board to the people you're representing.
How do we fix where we are, basically?
Yeah, or exactly, or just how do we become? It could be a simple fix, or how do we become more transparent as that, so we know what is happening.
I think there's a few things that we need to do. There's a tab on the district page right now called Transparency, and that's come about since the community has started asking for it. But it's really lacking when it comes to true transparency. And so I think having the itemized budget up there all the time for anybody to pull, it shouldn't take a FOIA request.
Like that, yep.
And so that should happen. Availability by our district officials and our board members, that needs to happen. If I can call a board member and talk to them and know they're going to answer and that I can believe and trust what they're saying, that makes me feel like there's transparency.
Yeah.
When I first announced I was running, I got a text from a number I didn't even know. And he said, "Do you have any children in school?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I've got 2 at the elementary." And I explained I had a nephew and a sister at the high school as well.
Mm-hmm.
And all he texted back was, "Well, you got my vote because you answered." I mean, after that, I asked who he was, and
Right.
he's a good supporter of mine. And that right there is transparency.
Mm-hmm.
If they trust you, by they I mean the community, the constituents, the teachers, even the students for that matter, if they trust you and you say, "I'm on top of this and I'm doing this," that's transparency.
Yeah.
And I think right now, a lot of what I hear from people is, "Well, I can't ever get anybody at the district or at the board to answer my email or answer my phone call." I heard somebody say, "I've been waiting 10 years for a phone call back." So, you hear things like that, and that goes back to why now for me, is the Lord made it to where I am available to do that. I did recently go back to work full time, but
Yep.
blessed me with a very flexible job where I'm able to answer the phone and to be there for people. And I imagine that come November we'll have more called meetings than usual, and I'm able to make sure that I'm there for those.
Yes.
And so that, I think, is a big part of transparency. And then I think that when people start seeing the equity and they realize that things are starting to be evenly distributed, then that will be transparency as well. We have a long road to mend the relationship with the community. And whoever is elected, they have to be prepared for that journey, and they have to be prepared for how long and how hard it will be. And I think that I've shown that I'm ready for that, just by how hard that I have been working through this campaign to get to know people and to hear from them.
Right. Well, I applaud you of just taking action and trying to change. I think anytime things are not going as they should, I think there should be a change. That's why, for me, I think there should be term limits on all politicians. If there's a term limit on the most powerful person in the free land, then there should be term limits throughout all the way down. If you can't get, obviously there's certain years for certain jobs or representation, but I think there should be. That's something that has been dawned on my mind in the last year or so. It's like, if they can't get it done in the time that they're doing it, they just need to mold somebody and that they believe in and let them take their place. I just think that having term limits, personally, it might not be your opinion, but we don't have to get into that. But yeah, I think somebody shouldn't be in there for 20 years. And hasn't any change or any representation back to the community.
And I think if you do your job right, then you don't have to be there for 20 years either.
Yeah,
if you do your job right, then you've set up the stage for other people to come in and continue what you're doing instead of having to clean up what you're doing.
Right. You were talking about the student aspect and representing the students, or even the students. So a lot of things have changed over the last 10 years as far as things that are being taught, and I think this is something that's got to be talked about. It's a very touchy subject, but we got to be transparent, and we need to touch on all subjects. And I think that is the gender identity crisis that is rampant in the schools, or not even the schools, but in the United States or wherever, and also the critical race theory of how that is impacted. What do you see? What's your stance on the gender identity crisis? I don't even want to necessarily call it a crisis, but gender identity in general. and the critical race theory on them two-part questions?
Well, coming from a faith background, I believe there's two genders.
Yeah.
I also believe that all people are created equal, and I don't think that we need special curriculum for that. At the state level and even in our district, CRT, critical race theory, is against the law, but that does not mean that it doesn't creep in some way, shape, or fashion. And so on the district level, we have to take that on an individual basis, and so it's very important for parents to stay engaged in their students' classwork. So that they know when it's creeping up in an individual classroom, and that they can make the district aware. And so that is pretty much CRT in Lancaster as of now. And so the more that we can handle individual situations like that now, the more we can ensure that it doesn't become a more broad issue in Lancaster. As far as the gender issues go, I will say this. At Buford Elementary, 5th grade students last year were sent home on the last day of school with a pamphlet, and I have a copy of it, that said that society doesn't have to limit you. It doesn't matter if society says you're a boy or a girl. My son was in 4th grade. Had he been in 5th grade and come home with that, I would have been heated. And so at that time, I actually got a lot of calls from parents then, because I had already made my campaign known. And I had already been vocal for parents and even for teachers, because there are a lot of teachers in this district that don't want to teach that stuff either.
Right.
And so I get a lot of anonymous reports from staff. One thing I've done in the past is actually read those anonymous letters at the board meetings, so that the board and the district staff can hear that, because these staff members are so scared to speak up for fear of retribution. And I've even ran across that campaign, and yeah, Courtney, I absolutely support you, but I'm scared to put a sign in my yard, and I understand that, and it shouldn't be that way. If somebody runs against me in 2026 and a staff wants to put their sign in their yard, they're taxpayers too, and they should be able to.
Right, freedom of speech.
Exactly. And during COVID, a lot of these staff that were parents felt they couldn't speak up for their children because of their jobs. And so, I hear that a lot. But back to the gender identity pamphlet. When the parents came to me, I did give them all the board emails and the superintendent email, and I said, you need to email that to them, and you need to tell them how you feel about that being taught to your child. I think those things should be taught in the home. I will talk to my child about that stuff. I don't need a public education talking to them. I want them to teach them reading and writing and math. I'll teach them those things. And so I know one parent emailed, and the board was completely unaware that pamphlet had gone out. And then,
so this was internal?
This
I'm saying the pamphlet was internal.
It was. So it was part of a puberty class that's given on the last day of school, and they separate the boys and the girls and show them a little video, and then they were handed out that pamphlet. Most of them didn't even look at it, put it in their book bag, and then it was parents that found it later that was like, oh my goodness, what is this? And so the board didn't know that was going out. And then the superintendent also admitted that he didn't know it went out, that it wasn't even screened before going out.
Yeah.
So basically, it kind of...
we're in Buford.
Yeah. Yeah. Passed Bumpy on a tractor on the way to school the other morning. So,
yeah.
But basically admitted that we're passing out stuff to, whether it's gender identity, CRT, or anything. We're passing out pamphlets to our students that nobody in this district, no adult, has screened and said this is okay, because that's not okay.
No. At least so bring it to their knowledge.
Well, exactly.
And
exactly.
It's even if they throw it away, or it's just the fact of the impact that even one or two per kids, kids are smart these days. They got more access to.
Well, they have Chromebooks. They could go home and Google that and find out something I don't want my kid to know.
Exactly. So they have more access. So it's just about the impact of what it is. It doesn't matter if they throw it away or not. It made an impression.
And parents are busy these days. And so I completely understand if you're not able to look at every little thing that comes home.
Yeah.
And so what happens when you don't see that and your kid researches it themselves? And then they're confused, because in my home, like I said, we teach that there's two genders, and that's what happens at my church too, and that's what my kids hear. And so if they hear something different or they Google something different, that's a problem, and that's something that should be taught in the home and not in the school.
So one thing we hadn't talked about, and I think it's a good way to end it, and we'll let you tell your constituents how they can vote in the process of that. But it was one thing I think that needs to be talked about, because I'm a faithful person just like you, and God is the center of everything that I try to do, and it was the thing that happened with the prayer and at football games, or the school system made a statement. Like I said, I saw it for what it was on the surface, but I just kind of want to lean in on you. You are a soon-to-be representative, so I guess maybe explain a little bit on what happened there from the top down.
Okay, so in 2000 there was a Supreme Court decision that said that you could not pray over the PA system before school-sanctioned events. So AJ had still been doing it since 2000. There were a lot of, like Buford did it up until
Did it come from the state that it was implemented by the state? Was that from, I guess, where did that mandate or rule come into place in 2000?
After the Supreme Court decision, several states and districts kind of had their own policy, and at that point, Lancaster did institute a policy saying, moment of silence, and then you can read the Sportsman Creed, which was made up by some students in 2000. So that was instituted in 2000. For my understanding, Buford did not stop in 2000, and AJ definitely did not stop in 2000. And so it was some years back Buford did stop, and that's why we have a moment of silence. But AJ was still doing it. And so some weeks back, a pastor was on his way to give the opening prayer and was called and told that the district said they couldn't do it.
We don't have to tell who called, but do we know what the seniority of who called? Do we know that?
It was somebody in the district office that contacted the school, and then through the coaches got to him. So
there again, they just being aware, made it aware now.
Exactly. So obviously somebody, probably complained or something. That's how it came to light that it was still happening. One of my questions in all of this, which is the question not just about faith-based issues in our county, is how does it go on for 22 years and nobody knows? Who's not going to their local events for their schools, whether it be district office staff and superintendent or board members or whatever. You should have showed up to a game in the past 22 years and known that was still happening. So,
And if they took the stance to comply with the Supreme Court rule, were they just scared to make an announcement, were they, whatever it may be, like you're saying, it's been 22 years.
Exactly.
That just goes to show the attention that's being put on it, which the proper attention should be put on that. But to me, you need to stand for the flag. I hear now, when we were in school, and this is just transpired over the last, they're not even making them stand for the flag. And to me, that is not a good way to set an example of authority or look at something that is, your freedom that you have, and it instills in them, lack of
patriotism.
Yeah.
And this is the best country to live in, so why do you not have patriotism?
Exactly. So, to me, not making them stand for the flag, that's a separate issue of prayer. It's always been a moment of silence. Now, it's just a trickle effect of not prayer, then it's not, then it's a moment of silence, and now teachers are not making them stand for the flag. I'm saying that you stand for the flag, but it's just, I guess what I'm saying is that is where do you draw, where does it keep going? I got a buddy, he teaches, it's not in Lakes County, but he teaches in the gym for elementary school, and he makes them stand up and salute the flag. So it can be done on a if you take the stance as a teacher. I know that's a teacher issue, and we're talking about the school board and representation of that, but to me it's just a trickle down effect, and there's got to be a drawing point, a drawing the line to saying we're not going to stand for that.
Yeah, and as far as the prayer over the PA, as a Christian, I want to hear it. As an American, I know that means that a Buddhist can get up and say it right after a Christian does, and so there is a fine line that you have to walk there. But going back to the gender identity and how I want that to be taught in my home and not in school. We teach standing for the flag in my home too. We
Right.
teach respecting adults in my home too, and so we've got to, we talk about making sure that parents are involved in education. Well, that means that holding their own children accountable. And so if a child misbehaves, then that parent should get involved and hold them accountable. So parents can't scream for parents' rights and then not parent their kid. And so that is a two-edged sword, and I'm all for prayer, and I'm all for standing for the flag. And I think that once we get hearts right, then those things happen. And so that is in the workings in our district. There are a lot of people, and we are very blessed that we have so many people in our schools that are allowed in our schools to minister to our students and to our staff, and especially our staff. Our staff are beaten down right now. They are more beaten down than they've ever been, and they need somebody to speak for them. And I think that we've got to make sure that we always remember the kids are first. I mean, that's our district's motto, put kids first.
Right.
So by doing that, then the teachers and the parents have to realize that there's the common goal is that the students succeed. And that means parents not attacking teachers, which unfortunately does happen sometimes. But it also means that teachers are given the resources they need to succeed as well. So I think that's where it comes back to with the prayer in schools and the Supreme Court decision and all that is, yes, we've got to draw a line somewhere. And so it's not just with prayer, it's with a lot of issues in our district right now. Lines need to be drawn.
You're right.
And it's time for somebody to step up and draw.
Well, Ms. Crump is going to draw some lines, it sounds like, but I want to thank you for taking the time to speak and on these issues, and I want to wish you luck on this, and I applaud you for your commitment and your work ethic. I think from what I've seen, she's going out there and working, and if in any type of realm, you have to work to get where you want, and if you want a candidate that will work for you, I think Ms. Crump is the right woman for the job. So I want to give the final word to you on why they should vote for you and where they can vote in the process of that.
So first up, I'll say that the election is November 8th, and on the ballot my name will be Courtney Crump Green. Garrett calls me Miss Crump because I was Miss Crump for a very long time when he was in school. So you will see that on the ballot too.
My apologies.
Hey, it's fine. That's why I left my name on there, because I'm proud of that name too. But yeah, it's on November 8th. You will vote wherever you normally go vote. This is a midterm election, so we do want to make sure that we turn out. From everything that I've heard, this particular race in District 3 is going to make people turn out, and I want you to turn out. I want to hear your voice, regardless of how you vote. We should hear you, and the district should hear you, and whoever is elected should hear you. And so I want to hear you, and I want to hear you now, and I want to hear you after November, and I want to see what do you want, and how can we make that happen within reason. I want transparency, I want accountability, and I want to make sure that we are available. I want to make sure that when you call me, I'm able to get answers for you or steer you where you can get those answers. And I want to make sure that promises are kept, and that includes with money being spent and where it's being spent. So again, thank you so much for the support that I have received thus far, and I really would appreciate your support on November the 8th. Courtney Crump Green for School Board District 3.